On the night when I was pushed off the cliff by Ophelia and left to die, she was watching fireworks with the man I loved the most. After that magnificent display of fireworks all over the sky, he dotingly covered up for her. And she got her wish and became the most beautiful bride. In this new life, the person that the man got down on one knee and sincerely proposed to was me. Unfortunately, this time I didn't want his favor or his love. All I wanted were her life and his life. Astrid, how are you feeling? A gloomy voice rang out like a thunderclap. Suddenly coming to my senses, I found myself lying on a hospital bed with Hugo, who had a concerned look in his eyes, in front of me. And standing behind him, with a fierce and malicious look in her eyes, was Ophelia, the very person who had pushed me off the cliff with her own hands and caused my tragic death. I suddenly realized that this time, heaven had actually allowed me to wake up from that nightmarish murder. However, the murderer was still watching coldly right in front of me, ready to take the opportunity to deal me a fatal blow at any time. Seeing me lost and at a loss, Hugo frowned slightly. I'll go and call the doctor. With that, he was about to get up and leave. I was startled and suddenly grabbed his hand, saying blankly, Hugo. What's going on? How did I end up lying here? Looking pained, I added, my head hurts so much. The man in front of me had a sudden flash in his eyes, and a look of surprise also appeared in Ophelia's venomous gaze fixed on me. At this time, the doctors and nurses arrived in time and asked me a series of questions and gave me an examination. Ms. Astrid's various indicators have improved. However, after suffering a severe external impact, it may have caused a situation of selective amnesia. After the doctor left, Hugo, who had been silent for a while, gently hugged me in his arms, and his low voice was ambiguous in meaning. It doesn't matter if you can't remember. At this time, Ophelia stepped forward, hiding her inquiring eyes and putting on an apologetic look instead. Miss Astrid, I'm sorry. I wanted to see what the girl Hugo loved dearly was like. So that day when you were climbing the mountain, I rashly stopped you and said a few words to you. I just didn't expect that it would make you so excited that you accidentally slipped and fell off the cliff. It's all my fault. She lowered her eyes guiltily, and her voice sounded sincere. Only I knew how maliciously she had provoked me at that time and how she had deliberately stretched out her hand to push me into the bottomless abyss. After being convinced that I was bound to die, she even calmly drove away and watched the magnificent fireworks with Hugo that very night. It wasn't until 3 full days later that my already cold body was discovered by a lost passerby. As a lonely ghost, I drifted to Hugo's side with tears in my eyes. Watching him cry bitterly after learning of my death, I was full of hope that he would seek justice for me. As I wished, he did find something strange. But after tracing it back to his first love, he actually chose to use his influence to quietly cover up for her and clean up the mess for her. Finally, with the light-hearted reason of accidental slip, my death was officially concluded, putting the final nail in the coffin of this murder. My former lover's cover-up and indulgence of the murderer was no different from pushing me into hell again. With my body and heart both dead, I swore at their grand engagement ceremony that if there was an afterlife, I would definitely take revenge at all costs. Until now, when I opened my eyes and everything started over. Pulling my thoughts back, I raised my pale face and said sincerely, it's okay. I can't remember clearly what happened either. If this accident has also caused you trouble, I'm very sorry. Hearing this, Ophelia looked at me slightly surprised. And Hugo, who had been keeping a poker face beside me all along, also relaxed a bit unnoticeably. After all, Ophelia was his first love. How could he hope that her hands would be stained with blood? It would be best if such dirty things had nothing to do with the intellectual and elegant her. If unfortunately it did have something to do with her, he would, just like in the previous life, do his best to cover up everything for her. Just because she was his first love whom he had been longing for years and who had just returned to the country. And I was just his girlfriend whom he hadn't even acknowledged in public for 3 years. On the day I was discharged from the hospital, Hugo had something urgent to deal with and couldn't come. After I got into the car he sent, I received a comforting call from him on purpose. It doesn't matter. I understand. Work is important, I said considerately. Yeah, be good. Hugo's voice was deep and magnetic, but then he suddenly said, Ophelia wants to invite us to dinner tonight to express her apology. Do you want to go? Can your body take it? Did I really have a choice? Suppressing the sneer in my heart, I said gently, sure, I'm feeling much better. Before I could finish my words, with a bang, I was pushed forward by a force of impact. I couldn't help screaming. What's wrong, Astrid? There were repeated questions from the other end of the phone, but I cut off the call at the right time. Miss Astrid, are you okay? After the driver in the front seat steadied the steering wheel again, he immediately turned around and asked nervously. I was still in shock, my face pale. What happened? Just now, a car without license plates suddenly crashed into us and then fled. I'll call the police right now. Just as the driver picked up his phone, a call cut in first. I heard Hugo's slightly urgent voice coming from the phone. So the driver quickly explained and reported the accident that had just happened. 20 minutes later, Hugo, who had rushed over in a hurry, hugged me in his arms and asked me if I had been frightened. I opened my terrified eyes. Fortunately, you're here. Otherwise, these consecutive accidents really scared me a bit. Hugo protectively held me, who was still trembling. However, when the driver asked whether we needed to call the police to handle it, he was ambiguous and didn't give a definite answer. Looking up at his inscrutable expression, I knew that this accident wouldn't lead to any result. Whether it was the work of his first love or not, anyway, he would, just like in the previous life, take care of everything for her. But in fact, I had designed this car accident myself. Not for his protection, but to quietly plant a seed in his heart. Since she was going to set a trap for me at dinner tonight, that was just fine. This was a meeting gift from me to her, in the restaurant. Because I was still recovering from my illness and also shocked by the car accident, my face was pale. In sharp contrast, Ophelia had a carefully made up, bright and charming face. Astrid, here, I sincerely apologize to you again. Ophelia sincerely raised her glass. If I had reminded you in time that the road was slippery under your feet that day, this unfortunate accident wouldn't have happened. It's okay. It's not your fault. I also raised my glass, being understanding again. While chatting and laughing, one delicious dish after another was served. When Ophelia saw the shrimp dish, her eyes suddenly lit up. And Hugo, who had been paying attention to her every move, also unconsciously curled the corners of his lips slightly. The two of them looked at each other with a tacit understanding and smiled, completely unaware of my cold-eyed observation. Ophelia scooped up a bowl of shrimp and naturally handed it to Hugo. Hugo wiped his hands clean with a napkin and started peeling the shrimp with his long and good-looking fingers. It was really ridiculously doting that a noble young master who had always lived a life of luxury would peel shrimp for someone in person. Watching his actions with great interest, after a while, Ophelia suddenly seemed to come to her senses. She looked at me a bit embarrassed and said, Hugo, look. Astrid is still here. Hugo paused with his fingers, and his deep, dark eyes also turned to me. I smiled shyly and said, I know you two have a good relationship. I don't mind. Ophelia was stunned for a moment, then pursed her lips and smiled. Then I can't be so overbearing. With that, she picked up the bowl of peeled shrimp that he had already done and handed it to me. Let's eat it together. There was friendly kindness shining in her eyes. It seemed that Ophelia knew me better than Hugo. After being together for 3 years, Hugo hadn't even noticed that I was allergic to shrimp and crab. But she knew it. Sure. I smiled charmingly and accepted it all. I picked up the shrimp without changing my expression and ate them one by one. At night, a large area of red rashes appeared on my body. Seeing the patches of crimson on my fair skin, Hugo immediately called the family doctor. Listening to me moaning uncomfortably in bed while having the infusion, his tone was both distressed and reproachful. You knew you were allergic but still ate so much. I stuck out my tongue. I've lost my memory. I didn't remember this either. Oh, you're still grinning stupidly even with the 4 drip. He helplessly scraped my nose and his tone was doting. He didn't know that I was really happy. It wasn't just because I had just heard his displeased words on the phone to Ophelia outside the terrace, 3 strikes and you're out. Don't make things difficult for Astrid again. But also because I could temporarily avoid physical contact with him. When you don't love someone anymore, even a touch becomes unbearable. Late at night, Hugo, who had just coaxed me to sleep, was about to leave quietly when I stopped him with a sleepy voice. Hugo, where are you going? He paused and turned around. Although his expression was still calm, there was a hint of coldness in his voice. There's something going on at the company. I have to rush back to deal with it. I knew that he didn't like to explain too much. It was already out of patience for him to explain like this. But did he think I was going to throw a tantrum next? I wouldn't. Looking at him, I was extremely tender. You rushed over in a hurry this afternoon even though you were busy. I must have delayed your work. I'm sorry. His eyes moved slightly. He turned back and gently kissed my forehead. Why are you so good? If you don't feel well anywhere, tell the nanny, or you can call me at any time. Okay. When the sound of the door closing downstairs came, I put away my infatuated look and turned indifferently to the nanny who came to take care of me. The nanny felt a bit nervous being stared at by me. She scratched her fingers, not knowing what was going on. Miss Astrid, what's the matter? Aunt Agnes, it was you who told Ophelia about my going climbing, right? I didn't know until after I died in my previous life that she was bribed by Ophelia to monitor me and report my whereabouts to Ophelia at all times. She immediately looked flustered and wanted to defend herself, but I stopped her. Don't bother to defend yourself. There are surveillance cameras in my room. Think it over. Do you want to go to prison and implicate your son who is going to take the civil service exam, or turn around and help me instead? The nanny was stunned. Putting on my earphones, I listened to the sound coming from the small device placed in Hugo's car. Hugo, are you still angry with me? He replied casually, no. Her voice sounded a bit sad. But you blamed me because of her. Ophelia, you are unique in my heart. So, you don't have to do that, you know? But I just wanted to clumsily get closer to you. Then there was the sound of clothes rubbing slightly. Suddenly, she coquettishly said, do you remember what day this Saturday is? Huh? The 9th anniversary of our acquaintance. That night, I have a surprise for you. Yes, counting it up, their relationship had lasted for 9 years. 9 years ago, they met. 4 years ago, she was going abroad. The always proud Hugo didn't hesitate to propose to her to make her stay. But Ophelia refused and went to pursue another kind of life. She fully believed that Hugo would wait for her where he was. But it wasn't until 3 months ago that she suddenly realized that there was already me beside him. Because 1 year after she left, I met Hugo at a banquet and then we got together. To be fair, before Ophelia came back, Hugo was very nice to me and doted on me a lot. There was no lack of gifts or company. But after Ophelia came back, the one he truly loved was her. So even that little bit of doting left was rather casual. He could even sacrifice my life when necessary. On Saturday, perhaps to free up the evening time to keep the appointment, Hugo agreed to accompany me for lunch. Looking at the table full of dishes, he loosened his tie and looked up at me with a faint hint of surprise in his eyes. What's the good occasion today? Our beautiful anchor cooked in person? I smiled. I just want to reward General Manager Hugo for his meticulous care in these past few months. However, the smile didn't last long. Because after the meal, we both ended up in the emergency room of the hospital. Looking at Hugo, who was also having the infusion, I wiped my tears guiltily. I'm sorry. I really didn't know that those 2 kinds of food couldn't be eaten together. He looked at me, who had also been suffering from diarrhea and weakness all afternoon but was still busy taking care of him, and didn't blame me much. He just patted the back of my hand soothingly. In the evening, Hugo's phone kept lighting up. But he took a look at me and didn't answer it. It wasn't until I walked into the bathroom that he picked up the phone. Ophelia, I'm a bit tied up. I won't be coming. I'll make it up to you tomorrow. When I came out, Hugo was leaning lazily against the head of the bed, casually flipping through a magazine. Suddenly, he looked up and noticed my slightly red nose. What's wrong? I sat down on the edge of the bed and lowered my head. Hugo, I don't know if I've hidden it well enough. Actually, I'm a bit jealous. After getting injured, although I don't remember some things, I clearly remember that I love you very much. So, don't leave me behind, okay? Silly girl. After a while, the man in front of me sighed and hugged me a bit tightly. When Ophelia rushed to the ward in a hurry, wearing a dress, this was the scene she saw. She stood at the door in a daze, staring at me with her red eyes, and her expression was a bit out of control. And I rested my chin on the broad and thick shoulder that was facing away from the door, looking straight at her and slowly curling my lips into a smile. This is the 9th anniversary surprise for you. Do you like it? Ophelia wasn't the kind of person who would sit around waiting for her doom. In the early hours of that day, she gritted her teeth on the phone, as if she wanted to bite me right away. Astrid, you obviously haven't lost your memory. I underestimated you. So when it was the 3rd anniversary of me and Hugo half a month later, and she called him away with an urgent phone call, I wasn't surprised at all. In the earphones, I only heard her voice, high-pitched and excited. These fireworks are set off especially for you. Do you like them? His voice was smiling. I like them. Huh. So it's the same old trick again. In my previous life, when I was lying at the foot of the mountain, cold all over and waiting for death and despair, she also set off a magnificent and dazzling display of fireworks for him. Under the dazzling fireworks, she accepted his proposal from 4 years ago. Sure enough, she said a bit excitedly, Hugo, although I know it's not quite fair to Miss Astrid to say this now, but I still want to tell you my true feelings, no matter what you think of me. Actually, I fell in love with you long ago. But I didn't realize it at that time, so I went far away. Now that I'm back, I want to be your wife. Does your proposal from 4 years ago still count? There was silence in the carriage. At this time, I fiddled with my mobile phone and sent a message. I've kept the food warm. You can eat it whenever you come back. Don't work too hard. There was a ding sound in the earphones. After a while, I heard Hugo's rather cold voice, You'll always be my Ophelia. When Hugo came back, it was already past 12 o'clock. Outside the door of the room, the nanny whispered to him that Miss Astrid had waited for him all night and just fell asleep, and hadn't eaten much of the meal. After a while, the bed beside me sank as I was hugged into a slightly cool embrace. The next day, the news and photos of Ophelia and Hugo watching the fireworks hand in hand romantically were leaked. Owen beside me saw it and awkwardly advised me not to think too much. I pretended to hide my disappointment and sadly raised my eyes. Thank you for accompanying me here today. It's okay. Hugo asked me to. We've been friends for so many years. It's just a small favor. Owen was Hugo's friend for many years. A few days ago I deliberately chose a day when he was on a business trip and said that I wanted to go back to the hospital for a re-examination. He couldn't come but he was worried so he asked Owen to accompany me. But I knew that at this time Hugo wasn't on a business trip. Instead, he was called back to the old house by an urgent phone call. Perhaps he was being reprimanded for the gossip news. In my previous life, I also found out later that even someone as outstanding as Hugo was under the pressure of a family-arranged marriage. The elders in the family didn't allow his relationship outside to be too high-profile. At that time, he had been reluctant to make our relationship public for a long time. But for Ophelia, he first proposed under pressure and then married her 5 years later. It could be seen that it was true love. In the evening, the car in the mobile phone's location finally had a new movement track. I put on my earphones and heard him make a phone call in the car instructing someone to suppress the news. Immediately after that, he received a call from Ophelia. Ophelia's sweet voice was on speakerphone. Hugo, did you miss me while you were on a business trip? I've been busy all day. I only have some time now. Not noticing the tiredness in his voice, she let out a clear and satisfied laugh like silver bells. Ophelia then said, I thought about it. It's also unfair to Miss Astrid. Why don't you find a time to have a frank talk with her and make it clear? It's better to cut the Gordian knot. Hugo replied softly, Late at night, when Hugo, who came to cut off the emotional ties, showed up at the door carrying his coat and looking travel-worn, I rushed over barefoot and hugged him tightly. Hugo was stunned. Just as he was about to speak, I preemptively pressed my index finger against his lips. Looking at the tiredness between his eyebrows, I said with distress, You're tired from your business trip. Don't say anything. Take a rest first. I led him to the sofa and gave him a massage. He closed his eyes and fell asleep quietly. Looking at his sleeping face, I immediately contacted the entertainment reporters. In the middle of the night, Hugo woke up and saw me sitting barefoot on the carpet, tightly holding his hand and falling asleep beside his legs. I thought that I must have looked pitiful at this time. Otherwise, why would he give me a gentle kiss and then gently pick me up horizontally and carry me back to the room? In the morning, as soon as I opened the gate outside the garden, I saw a red Maserati parked there. If I remembered correctly, this was a gift that Hugo had given to Ophelia before, and its license plate number was the most high-profile 520. Sure enough, the next second, Ophelia got out of the car gracefully, swaying as she walked. Taking off her sunglasses, her red lips curled up slightly, and there was a look of certainty in her eyes. Astrid, did you have a good time on the 3rd anniversary? She had an imposing manner as soon as she opened her mouth. Not wanting to argue with her, I lowered my head and wanted to leave quickly. Suddenly, another car stopped beside us, and several people dressed as entertainment reporters jumped out, holding long and short cameras and pointing their microphones at Ophelia. Ophelia was slightly stunned and immediately put on a more perfect and appropriate look. Miss Ophelia, is the report about you and Mr. Hugo, the president of the Hugo family, true? There's a rumor that you two are about to get married. Could you share something about it? Suddenly, a reporter couldn't squeeze through, so he turned around and interviewed me instead. Miss Astrid, as Mr. Hugo's rumored girlfriend for many years, do you have anything to say? Are you the third party? The entertainment reporters asked very directly because Ophelia was a producer and I was a female anchor on TV. We were more or less related to the entertainment circle. But I just had a pale face, biting my lip and couldn't say a word. At this time, Ophelia took a look at me, smiled charmingly and responded generously. Emotional matters are very complicated and can't be explained in a sentence or two. But I can only say that if it's true love, no one can take it away. It was a double entendre. After saying that, she brushed the broken hair in front of her forehead. The eye-catching diamond ring on her ring finger sparkled brightly in the sunlight. Suddenly, the cameras clicked away, and the reporters frantically asked about the wedding date. The more embarrassed I looked, the more triumphant the look in Ophelia's eyes became as she was surrounded by the reporters. Until she saw the noble-looking Hugo walking out of the villa with a look of surprise in her eyes. She didn't know that Hugo was here because the nanny hadn't told her, but in the next second, she composed her expression, looked at him eagerly, and there was a bit of certainty in her satisfied smile. Perhaps she wanted to force him to make a statement on this formal occasion and completely put me in a bad light. Unfortunately, she forgot that Hugo hated being calculated and forced the most. Sure enough, when faced with the many reporters' questions about the marriage, Hugo's face darkened slightly, his tone became a bit cold, and he casually said, "It's just a rumor." Immediately, Ophelia's eyes widened, and her face turned pale. After Hugo gloomily instructed the public relations team to handle these news stories well, I quietly said, "Hugo, let's break up." Hearing this, Hugo paused as he was loosening his tie, his pupils flashed, and he looked at me with an inscrutable expression. He raised an eyebrow and said casually, "Is it because of Ophelia?" "I've already said it's just a rumor." I looked at him sadly. "I just don't want to be a stumbling block for you too." His eyes suddenly darkened. Suddenly, he walked over, looked down at me from above, and kissed me forcefully. Then he kissed me harder and harder until I tasted a bit of the bloody flavor of a bitten lip in my mouth. After the crazy passionate kiss, Hugo rubbed my face with the pad of his thumb. "You're the sweetest Astrid in the world. Don't mention breaking up again." I gasped for breath, took the opportunity to lie in his arms, and didn't mention leaving again. Haha. How could I leave at a time like this? I just wanted to figure out my place in his heart. Now I can be sure that at least for him, I'm no longer the dispensable Astrid who can be abandoned casually. Recently, Hugo has been staying over for longer and longer periods of time. One night, he called to say that he had to work overtime and told me not to wait up for him. I agreed, but then I put the food into a thermos lunchbox and drove to his office building. Outside the president's office, the secretary was a bit surprised to see me arrive. Seeing the troubled look on her face, I understood that there was someone in the office. With a thought in my mind, I made a gesture to keep quiet and approached the office. Through the crack of the door, I saw Ophelia holding Hugo's hand, the corners of her eyes slightly red, on the verge of crying. "Can I offer you my sincere apology? I didn't mean to show off. I was just carried away by happiness. I didn't know it would cause trouble for you." Hugo rubbed his temples. "Forget it, it's okay." Perhaps because the person who used to look at her with so much affection now showed hesitation, Ophelia got a bit panicked. She asked repeatedly, "Have you fallen for her? Is she more important than me now?" Hugo didn't give a direct answer and just said a bit impatiently, "Don't overthink it." Ophelia hugged him tightly from behind, weeping pitifully, "Please, Hugo. Don't change your heart and don't abandon me." Finally, unable to resist her display of vulnerability, Hugo still let out a soft sigh and didn't push her away, with a complicated expression on his face. Hiding the sarcasm in my eyes, I handed the thermos box to the secretary and whispered instructions. "Don't disturb them. Take this in later. Remind General Manager Hugo to eat something so that his stomach doesn't hurt again." The secretary took the lunchbox and nodded, looking at me sympathetically. But she didn't see the smile on the corner of my mouth after I turned around. In the following days, I lived my life in peace and contentment. To please him and also for exercise, I started learning to play golf, tennis, and squash. As a result, entertainment reporters could always take pictures of us exercising together and entering and leaving clubs hand in hand sweetly. Gradually, I began to accompany Hugo and appear in the public eye. However, someone got impatient with my peaceful life. The nanny said that Ophelia had called twice a day to ask where I was and whether the president was here or not. I said, "Just tell her the truth. The more impatient she is, the more I can deal a fatal blow." On Monday, taking advantage of Hugo being busy, I made an appointment with Owen to meet at a club without telling him. Opening the door, Owen walked into the slightly dim private room and asked a bit strangely, "What's going on? Why so mysterious? You didn't even let Hugo know." I deliberately hid the gloom between my brows and said with a bitter smile, "I need your help with something." Owen raised an eyebrow and sat down. Then I told him slowly in a soft and gentle voice. Only he didn't notice that as I talked, the distance between us was getting smaller and smaller, and I was sitting closer and closer to him. After a while, Owen looked at me with pity in his eyes. After I took a glance at the location on my phone, I slowly leaned on his shoulder. "Astrid, you?" Owen looked at me a bit awkwardly. Looking at my red eyes, he hesitated and then said, "All right, if you want to lean on my shoulder, just do it." "Thank you, Owen." Just then, the door of the private room was suddenly pushed open. Looking up, I saw Hugo looking at me with a gloomy face, and beside him was Ophelia with an animated expression. "Hugo, I told you. There's something improper between them." Hugo's gaze was as sharp as a blade, fixed on me. His voice was as cold as ice. "Astrid, give me an explanation." At this time, Owen immediately jumped up, at a loss. He wanted to defend himself, but after looking at me, he held back. Hugo strode over, grabbed my wrist. His knuckles turned white, showing the raging anger beneath his calm exterior. I was nervous and uneasy. "It's not what you saw." My voice was weak and unconvincing. Seeing that Hugo was bothered by it, Ophelia was stunned for a moment, and a flash of jealousy crossed her eyes, but she quickly regained her composure and focused on fueling the fire. Astrid, I didn't expect you to secretly seduce Owen. You're really something. Following Ophelia's words, his face became even darker, and his eyes were as cold and severe as frost. Ophelia continued to add fuel to the fire. No wonder I bumped into you two being intimate that day. Where was it? It was the obstetrics and gynecology department of the hospital. The strength in his hand increased mercilessly, as if he was going to crush me. I couldn't help but let out a cry of pain. Astrid, no explanation? His voice was deep like mist. I just looked at him pleadingly and said in a flustered manner that there was nothing. His anger reached its peak, and Hugo threw me away mercilessly. I fell onto the sofa, and Ophelia, who was watching the show behind him, now had a look of triumph and victory in the corners of her eyes. At this time, Owen, who had been worried but helpless all along, finally couldn't hold back. He shouted, "Oh, why won't you tell the truth even at a time like this? Hugo, it was you who asked me to accompany her to the hospital that day. She didn't want me to tell you that she..." Considering other people's privacy, Owen finally shut up. At this time, I lowered my eyelashes and trembled as I sobbed, because of the injury on the cliff. I can't have children anymore. Hugo was shocked. So she came to me today also to ask me to help keep this secret and not tell you, so as not to make you sad. At this time, all the color drained from Ophelia's face, but she still forced a cold smile and said, "Do you need to sit so close when chatting? You were almost sitting on his lap." Owen couldn't explain it clearly either. Ophelia regained some confidence and was about to speak again. But suddenly, Hugo, who had been staring at me closely, finally noticed that something was wrong with me. He rushed towards me, looking nervous. "Why is your face so red?" After touching me again, he exclaimed, "Why is your whole body so hot?" With that, he immediately picked me up horizontally and quickly carried me out of the private room. I held the physical examination report in one hand and tightly grasped the corner of his clothes with the other, and a tear slid down from the corner of my eye. "Hugo, don't misunderstand me." In the villa, after the doctor's examination, he quietly told Hugo that I had been drugged, which was why I had a persistent high fever and was in a confused state. In an instant, Hugo turned his head to look at the nervous nanny beside him, his eyes as sharp as knives. On the first floor, Ophelia was still waiting anxiously. As soon as Hugo's figure appeared on the stairs, she rushed towards him eagerly. "Hugo, I've fallen into Astrid's trap. She deliberately set up the situation to deceive me and lured me into it." Suddenly, Hugo slapped her directly, his eyes flashing with a dangerous light. "Did you ask her to drug me?" There was a raging fury beneath his icy voice. Ophelia covered her face, stunned. "Drug? What drug?" At this time, the nanny appeared, trembling. "Miss Ophelia, I'm sorry. I've told everything about you bribing me. Please help me plead with Mr. Hugo. I don't want to have a criminal record." Ophelia narrowed her eyes. "What are you talking about? When did I ask you to drug anyone?" The nanny was trembling. "I have recordings and chat records as evidence. How can you deny it just like that?" Instantly, Ophelia's eyes widened, and she was left speechless. No matter what, she would never have thought that this whole drama was staged by me and the nanny together. The previous encounter at the hospital was deliberately arranged by me. I asked the nanny to disclose Maya and Owen's whereabouts to her. Given her personality, she would definitely go and check it out for herself. And today, I took the drug first and then asked the nanny to send her a message saying that I had secretly made an appointment with Owen behind Hugo's back and sneaked out. Hugo approached Ophelia, grasped her chin with one hand, and his brows were filled with disgust. "Don't forget that the incident on the cliff was also your doing. You're so vicious that it's disgusting." She was crying bitterly and excitedly denied it, but he threw her to the ground with a fierce shove. "Huh! That was enough of watching the show." I went back to bed in a good mood and fell asleep leisurely. Only at night, I was sweating all over and talking nonsense. Hugo, believe me. He held my hand tightly and said in a low voice, I believe you. I'm here. In a daze, I grasped the cuff of his sleeve. Don't make things difficult for the nanny. She has taken good care of me during this period. He gently brushed away the strands of hair on my forehead, and his voice was full of tenderness. You have a fever. Have a good rest. After recovering from the illness, Hugo doted on me in every possible way. He took me to various formal occasions arm in arm, introducing me to others naturally and generously. He gave me properties and jewels, accompanied me on trips to relax. He reported his business trips to me and carefully selected gifts for me. Every time I opened my eyes, I could see those once casual eyes now shining with an infatuated look that he couldn't help. We played around freely in every corner of the house, and smiles filled the corners of our eyes and brows. But beneath these smiles, my heart was full of sarcasm. The Astrid who once loved you wholeheartedly is dead, and now you've fallen in love with someone who is calculating against you with every thought. Isn't it ridiculous? Perhaps sensing my suddenly cold mood, Hugo reached out to smooth the sadness between my brows and coaxed me, nowadays, medicine is advanced. We'll still be able to have children. I held his hand. As long as you're here. He stared at me and said solemnly, I'll always be here. In this way, I successfully took away all the treatment that Ophelia had in the previous life. However, how could she be willing to accept it easily? That night, when Hugo was hugging me on the sofa and kissing the back of my head, and was about to take out the wedding ring that he had quietly prepared, Ophelia called. I clearly heard her say, Hugo, you don't care about my feelings anymore. But do you care about my life? After repeatedly assuring me, Hugo put on his coat and left quickly. I drove and followed him. The car stopped by the riverside. Ophelia was sitting on the railing, looking precarious. Behind her was the deep and gloomy river. Ophelia, get down. Ophelia turned her head with tears streaming down her face like pear blossoms and then broke into a smile through her tears. You came after all? Hugo walked towards her with his back to me. I couldn't see his expression clearly. But as soon as he stretched out his hand, she jumped into his arms. She hugged him tightly. If you want to die in the future, don't call me. Suddenly, Hugo's cold voice rang out. Ophelia's body stiffened. Deeply hurt, she looked up with tears all over her face. Do you have to be so heartless? This was Hugo. When he loved someone, he treated them like precious treasures. When he didn't love them, he discarded them like worn-out shoes. She wiped away her tears and stopped him as he was about to leave. Hugo, for the sake of our 9-year relationship, I have just one last request. Have a drink with me one more time. After that, I won't bother you two anymore. Hugo finally agreed. However, he first called me, gently told me to go to sleep and not wait for him, and said that when I opened my eyes tomorrow morning, I would see him. Looking at Ophelia's resentful expression, I obediently agreed. In this way, the two of them started drinking the wine that Ophelia had prepared in her car. But after just 2 sips, Hugo, who usually had a very good tolerance for alcohol, suddenly passed out drunk. Then I watched as she dragged him into the car, unbuttoned his clothes, and hugged him passionately. Watching General Manager Hugo, who had always been noble and extraordinary, being calculated against by his first love like this, I smiled. And I conveniently contacted the reporters for them. The next day, spicy and explosive reports came out, causing a big stir. At the same time, I disappeared. In the surveillance footage, Hugo couldn't find me in the empty house and instantly lost control. He called my name in every corner of the house and desperately dialed my phone number. But there was only the cold prompt that the phone was turned off. He kept sending me messages. Astrid, call me back. Astrid, be good. Reply to me. But he didn't receive any reply. After frantically instructing more people to look for my whereabouts, Hugo took out the ring, stared at it, and stood there in silence. Suddenly, the vibration of his phone pulled him back from his trance. Hope instantly rose in his eyes. And then it turned into bottomless disappointment. Perhaps it was a call from his family. He listened with restraint, his knuckles turning white as he clenched the phone tightly. After hanging up the phone, he immediately called his former first love, his voice gloomy and cold. "Ophelia, you should know the consequences of plotting against me." After saying that, he furiously threw his phone to the ground. Hugo didn't know that while he was going crazy looking for me, I showed up at the film and television city, waiting for Ophelia. The once glorious and complacent producer was now haggard. Seeing me, she took off her sunglasses, and hatred suddenly appeared in her eyes. "Astrid, how dare you show up in front of me?" I looked at the bruise at the corner of her eye and the corner of my mouth curled up slightly. "Ophelia, how did you become like this? I still remember the complacent look on your face when you pushed me off the cliff that day." She gritted her teeth. "I only regret that I didn't kill you that day." I smiled faintly. "Strangely enough, I had a dream when I was in a coma. I dreamed of a magnificent display of fireworks. Under the fireworks, Hugo got down on one knee and proposed sincerely. Then I dreamed of a dreamy and grand wedding. At the wedding, the groom Hugo was noble, elegant, and dazzling. Guess what? The bride that he looked at as if she were a precious treasure and with such sincerity was actually you." Ophelia shuddered all over because of the scene that was in both my dream and hers. Perhaps without me, the world would turn out like this. But fortunately, when I woke up, I found that the person he was staying with was me. Although clearly all of these should have been yours originally. I spared no effort to stimulate her nerves and stir up the sense of disparity in her heart. "Unfortunately, you almost killed me and could have had all of this." She clenched her fists tightly, her eyes turning red, and she seemed to be on the verge of losing control. At this time, I turned around and walked quickly into the warehouse, showing her my back. The sound of disorderly footsteps rang out. Suddenly, she attacked from behind and pushed me heavily onto the sandbag. Ophelia used all her strength to choke my neck, her eyes bulging, and screamed shrilly, "Since you also know that all of these should have been mine, you shouldn't have dared to come and steal my man." Suddenly, however, there was a muffled sound as a dagger plunged into the flesh. The strength in her hands disappeared instantly. Ophelia turned around in shock and exclaimed, "Hugo, you!" Then she fell heavily to the ground. I was gasping for breath, looking at Hugo in front of me with a horrified expression. Ophelia was still lying on the ground, panting. Her bloodshot eyes were full of disbelief. "Why? Why did you do this to me?" Hugo first wiped his hands clean with a tissue, then looked at her with disgust in his eyes. Suddenly, he took out a gun from his suit jacket and fired another shot at her. "I've said that I hate being calculated against the most." Ophelia's eyes, filled with unwillingness, were like a dead fish that couldn't close its eyes. She finally fell silent. After making a phone call and instructing someone to come and clean up the mess, Hugo looked at me, who was trembling beside him, and his sharp facial features instantly softened. He squatted down and hugged me, who was shaking. "Be good. Don't be afraid. I'm late. That's why Astrid got bullied." I sneered in my heart. "You weren't late. You came just in time." Suddenly, the sirens of police cars outside blared loudly. Hugo was very calm and composed when he was taken away. He even turned around to comfort me and told me not to be afraid. I knew that he was confident that his lawyers would have their arguments. Was it self-defense? Excessive defense? At most, it would be a trifling charge. General Manager Hugo didn't take it seriously. However, when he learned that I had turned around and testified against him for intentional assault, he instantly lost his sanity. There was only shock and pain left in his eyes. "Why? Astrid? Why?" I quietly watched him on the other side, pounding on the glass like a madman, roaring furiously like a trapped beast, but I didn't answer. He had always been arrogant and self-important. He didn't understand why I was treating him like this. Why I was betraying him who loved me deeply. But only I knew that I had never forgotten the hatred in my heart. In the middle of the night, when I dreamed, all I could recall was the despair of lying there cold that night, with no one to turn to. able to do nothing but wait for death in unwillingness. I couldn't let him lie there and experience it too, but at least I could make him experience it day and night in prison. Let Ophelia die at the hands of the person she loved the most. Let Hugo be betrayed by the person he loved deeply and be knocked down hard from the clouds. This was the best revenge. It was also the fate they deserved.